Thank you very much. So, a small disclaimer to the front seats. When I speak, I gesture a lot, and they rather told me not to use the microphone that you put on your head because it makes quite a weird noise, which I actually call my voice. But when I gesture, be careful for your face because I might throw it on accident. So, at this point of TED Talks, they usually drag out some person who's not really a scientist, not an entrepreneur, but rather like a plain Joe, or like Josephine in this case. So, I'm quite a mediocre person. The guy introducing me, he actually texted me a few days ago and he asked me, so could you like send me a short CV of yours because I don't know what to say about you. And I thought a lot and I don't know what to say about me either. But my grades are average. I could always do better, and I never consider myself one of those genius people who can solve those Facebook math problems that your mom shares, and they say that only 1% of people can do them. I do my best attempts at working out, but when I start running, people usually start running towards me since I look like I'm having an asthma attack and a stroke at the same time. And I can bear to look at myself in a mirror if it's not very early in the morning or not very late in the day. And I have a crowd of friends, but sometimes I suspect they are usually with me because they need my help with the economics. So what am I doing here on this stage? How bad did I have to get lost to actually wander in here? Well, I was born with a very ironic condition, and I was born very mediocre and a perfectionist at the same time. And it has cursed me since then, and it has been driving me nuts. So this is my story on the road to perfection and dealing with the ultimate failure. Okay, so when I look at your faces, I can see that you have all the same and one disease, the disfigurement of your faces. And it's quite rough, and I know that every morning you wake up and you try to fix that mess on the front of your head, and good luck. Well, I noticed that I have the same disease a few years ago too. Me, a perfection, I know. So actually most of the people hate their faces too, all seriousness. And when you ask about them, everyone mentions that they hate their nose. What's that about? About 800,000 nasal surgeries are performed every year, making it the most popular facial reconstruction surgery out there. Also, people usually hate their bodies. Skinny people want to put some meat on, thicker ones want to sell their meat to the skinny ones. And half of you can relate to the feeling when you sit down and your thighs do this squishy thing, so you lift them up a little bit so they look a little bit skinnier. And the other half of you can relate to the feeling when you sit down on a hard chair for far too long and your bottom kind of starts hurting because your bones are scraping the surface of the hard chair. And what helped me to not care about my feelings when I sit down is the realization that literally everyone sucks and everyone hates themselves. So the girl on your left probably hates her nose way worse than you do. And no one cares about your thighs. How self-centered you have to be to think that people actually are looking at your thighs during the speech. People are looking at the fools on the stage thighs, not yours. So these days, there's come a virtue in being a victim. You make a victim of yourself by saying all those nasty things that actually other people don't really notice about you because during that time, they are thinking about themselves, not about you. And the easiest way out of it is this strong realization that I'm the one that's causing the problem, I have to be the one that's fixing it. And most of you know the trick when they say, when you're nervous, imagine the room of people naked. Well, in my case, I say, imagine that literally everyone hates themselves and you're the only one confident. How strong is to be in a kind of a puny community that literally hates themselves and you suddenly refuse to acknowledge that and start to love who you are. It's a very powerful concept, and I suggest you should try it the next time. Now, moving on, we move to a second level, and this is a problem with your character. So we all have that one friend, and you. So you are very funny, but you wouldn't consider yourself like a humorist. Your grades are average, but you could always do better. And you probably have a certain amount of talents, but you're not an exceptional person. And then we all have that one friend. The one friend that can make the entire room laugh. The one friend whose grades are like yours, but somehow they radiate this aura of wisdom. And that friend somehow you think has like, probably a superior set of chakras and just was born with a better DNA than you, so it's kind of a destiny. Well, actually, most people think that way about you. Some people think that way about me, but not that much. And imagine what happens, and you are closing this samsara, this circle that literally everyone kind of thinks about the neighbor a little bit better than about themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a very huge value in humbleness. But somehow we say that everything is good in moderation, except when it comes to the good things. There's a huge value in moderation of being humble. So do that, be humble, but don't stay sitting down. And the last thing, and like the boss level of self-hate, is the crushing power of the past. And this is the hardest level because there's the least you can do about that. I'm a very awkward person, actually, most of the time. I have my very quite weird stories. And one thing happened to me like a few years ago. It was a very cold winter. I was walking home after school, and I was just minding my business, and I went to the bus stop, and I was just standing there, and there comes these two a bit older guys, and they walk in front of me, and one of them kind of looks at me, looks away, and then looks back very suddenly. And I was in my phase 1 at the time, so I knew it wasn't because of my gorgeous looks. So he kind of walks away, whispers something to his friend, and then they kind of walk in front of me back again, pretending not to look, but very clearly looking. So at that moment, I knew something was wrong. So turns out what happened is, because it was so cold, my face has lost the entire sensation of it, but my nose has been working the entire time. So there's a huge white clear snot that was dripping down my face and making camp on my chin. And I was so embarrassed and I was so ashamed that I didn't tell the story to anyone for a few years. And then the other thing happened to me quite a few days ago, very recently. I was walking to my location, and it was after school again, but this time, as I said, I was walking, and it's a very important detail. I was wearing this bright red, my school sweater, and these very tight legging type of pants. And I was just making my way, and again, people are looking at me. But right now, I'm in the position that I am now, so I'm just enjoying the attention, feeling fierce and good, but people keep looking at me, and that's unusual. So I start to realize something is clearly wrong, so I check myself out, and I can see that the zipper of my pants is all the way down, and since I was wearing those tight pants, it's not only down, but there's a huge gaping hole in my pants, and people were all looking and kind of wanting to say something, but just enjoying their day and thinking about me. And it was so funny. I had the biggest laughter fit in the middle of the city because I just visibly molested half of the town. And but this time, I changed my perception, and I told this story to literally everyone I could that day, and people were laughing, and I was laughing at myself. So you see, the moral is when you remove yourself, the embarrassing part from the story, only the funny part remains. And clearly, exactly the same phenomenon happens with very harsh and painful stories, the ones that you avoid talking about, things about like depression, anxiety, and things like that, which you feel like are not welcome in society, but actually are very much needed and are usually brought to conversation. So when you tell those stories to the wide community of people, you give them an opportunity to learn and to study it rather than actually living up to themselves. So the thing is, the conversation is very much needed. And you have also the power to control the way to perceive things. You either laugh from yourself or you feel embarrassed and ashamed and think about it before you sleep with your eyes open looking at the ceiling. So lastly, I know that probably you don't remember much of what I said because the speech was 10 or so minutes long. So I kind of combined a little set of rules to bring home and maybe use in your story, maybe not. This was all my experience. This is what I use. So if you don't relate to any of the phases that I mentioned, and if you relate on one phase too much, it's all okay. You might be in phase 1, 2, or 3 right now, but just the important part is not to camp there. Don't start building your home or your entire being in a certain phase of hate. So stay there for a while, look around, and then move on. So the rule number 1 is to remember that people first always look at themselves rather than at you and criticize themselves rather than at you. And that's a phenomenon that always happens, and you consciously have to think about it yourself. Don't put yourself down and don't make yourself a victim. The second part is simply consciously telling yourself the things you already know. If you think you're smart, you probably are, and probably everyone thinks that. The same goes for funniness, athleticism, and things like that. So once you tell it yourself, everyone will realize that. And the last part is the best part, is that the cringe stories, they make the best stories. If I hadn't had that snot on my face this few years ago, I wouldn't have a story to tell right now. Same goes to almost all stories, no matter good or bad. You'll always have an opportunity to tell them, and people have an opportunity to learn from them. So don't be scared to make more of those cringe stories, laugh at yourself, and trust me, life will be maybe a tiny bit easier when you're not your biggest enemy. Thank you.